Hello everybody, it's festival season in Minnesota and I watched 8 movies at MSPIFF, which is Minnesota International Film Festival. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to. The first movie I watched, and Aiden watched a couple, mostly he's just going to sit here in the adjoining seat as he would in a typical Drunkview. I'm drinking my Axeman IPA that I started in our Warfare review. So, the first movie I watched was Grand Tour, which was a French New Wave inspired avant-garde modern film that was, somebody got their hands on a vintage film camera and kind of like those Adam Sandler movies. He had like a vacation and he kind of filmed a movie around it. It kind of had like Wes Anderson vibes, though that in part comes from like the French New Wave stuff. But at times I thought the narrative, which was a little, not off standard. It was occasionally kind of annoyingly avant-garde, where there was kind of this overarching story that was this quirky story of a wife who wouldn't let her husband, who kind of left her, or her fiance who left her, go. And then she finds a new love interest, but is still hung up on her husband. So she chases him around Europe, and a bunch of stuff happens. Ultimately, this movie was fine. I really liked how it was shot. I thought the cinematography was awesome. I liked that it was kind of the old style camera, so you had really deep blacks, since old film cameras couldn't record blacks very well. It wasn't like a 4K, like, oh, you got deep contrast and it looks really good. It's not like that. It's just like how old film cameras worked, and lots of beautiful environments. The characters were okay enough. I just thought it was a little bit uneven, unfortunately. But you know what? Overall, it was meh.
I didn't see.
Next, I watched Brooklyn, Minnesota, which is a local film. Ish. There are some people who worked on TV shows. My understanding, it's like The Walking Dead and stuff, and one of the dude who wrote it is in Minnesota, and it's a film about being this kind of this more, I guess, liberal individual who kind of has to come back to a more conservative family after the death of his father, who he had some unresolved feelings with, and taking his daughter, who's a lesbian, back there. And it doesn't really have, it's also just kind of a film about like forgiveness, like kind of moving to the past and understanding. The mom is very hard to understand, that her granddaughter. The mom also really defends the father's actions, and ultimately the point of the movie is about the father has to come to grips that his father did some bad things but kept trying to make amends, and while it was not invalid for him to cut off his father, there was also some good times, and he kind of had to make the choice whether or not to forgive his father. And the grandmother had to decide if she wanted to be more open to newer, at least to her, ideas that are unfamiliar to her in her religious, smaller Minnesota town. It sounds like something that could easily fall into being a little preachy and obnoxious, but it actually skirts that pretty well. All of the characters are pretty well done. There's a lot of local talent and some national talent, and it feels like a real movie made in Minnesota. There's a lot of smaller movies that are similar that unfortunately just suffer from a lack of professionalism, which isn't, entirely their fault always, but this movie was really well done. It had a really solid cast and crew, and it was pretty good. It's more of a local affair, so I don't foresee this getting a super wide release, but I'm guessing it'll probably wind up on like Tubi or Amazon Prime, and if you're a Minnesota local, you'll probably get something out of it, because it's kind of got that like northern or southern Minnesota feel, where it's more rural and it's good. And, yeah, the characters are relatable. You understand everyone's perspective to an extent, and it's not like waggling a finger at mom exclusively for having these old-fashioned beliefs. And it's not looking down on the father for kind of being stubborn in his ways that he was affected by his father. So there's a lot of good stuff, and it's kind of about people learning to... Some people, I mean, the father needs to kind of embrace the father eventually kind of forgives the past and tries to make a more connected future with his family, and the grandmother, sort of has to learn to accept new and different ideologies to her, and it's a sweet little movie.
Okay, now I get to pop in.
Aiden needs to pop in for number 3.
We saw The Surfer. I actually saw this one. The new Nicolas Cage Ozploitation movie.
Hell yeah.
And it also has Victor Von Doom.
Yes, it
from
does.
the bad Fantastic Four movies, not the new one. Connor, what's the plot of The Surfer?
Nicolas Cage is a guy going through a divorce. He's been separated from his wife quite a while. He's moved on, but he kind of clings on to the past, but not necessarily the past with his wife, but further back to his childhood home when he lived in Australia with his father as a kid and really enjoyed surfing on a beach. He takes his son to this beach and realizes that there's a cult-like gang going around worshipping this older surfer who grew up around the same time as Nicolas Cage, played by Dr. Doom guy from those Fantastic Four movies.
Yeah, and Niptuck himself.
They put Nicolas Cage starts coming into conflict with them, and it turns out to be an ultimate hazing thing, but he also kind of learns that there's some devious shit happening, and Nicolas Cage has to choose between kind of joining up with this cult or letting go of the past and embracing the future with his son. Oh my god, it's the same themes as Brooklyn, Minnesota.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, except with like a cult leader who's like a child molester killing people. So, but other than that, it's like Brooklyn, Minnesota. So Aiden, what did you think of The Surfer?
It's very weird and interesting. I liked it, and it's also kind of boring and weird. Most of the movie is Nicolas Cage standing in a parking lot getting gaslit girl boss gatekeeped from the beach.
Yeah, he is.
And they just steal everything from him and try to convince him he's a hobo. And punch him around.
They gaslight Nicolas Cage into thinking he's a hobo.
And punch him around, and
they start gaslighting the audience into thinking maybe he's the crazy hobo.
Yeah. Yeah, they start gaslighting the audience. They gaslight Nick Cage. I think maybe like the one flaw with that is that there's that scene early on when he's watching Dr. Doom's Instagram reel. And Dr. Doom's like, I'm a specialist in breaking people down and making them miserable for 7 days, then bringing them in rebuilt.
And then he's like, the monks at the monastery would make you sit there for 7 days.
You know, the audience gaslighting might have worked better if that scene wasn't in. But other than that, it's like a weird... Quentin Tarantino would love this shit. He loves stupid Ozploitation movies.
Oh yeah, this movie was made specifically for Quentin Tarantino to display in his theater all day.
Yeah.
Where you could watch it alone. Just him and Selma at Alex's feet.
It's a weird and uncomfortable movie. Nicolas Cage gets increasingly more delirious, and the filmmaking does, and you know, it's not like a crazed Nicolas Cage performance, surprisingly.
No.
It's a rather subdued Nicolas Cage, but
we don't get a lot of... It's kind of like... Nicolas Cage is kind of like the Eminem of actors, and I'm going to explain myself as like...
I know exactly what you mean.
Like Nicolas Cage will occasionally be like, okay, I can bring out the crazy Nicolas Cage. He doesn't really do that normally anymore. Not like he did back in the day.
No.
nowadays when he brings it out, it's like, oh, you're crazy, Nicolas Cage. And it's like the same thing. I was thinking about that new like
when he did it in
Eminem album where he's like, I'm gonna be
fun.
like so bad, and then he like made like half baked remarks that are clearly like
engagement
based. And I'm not saying it's
this isn't
is what it is.
Bad crazed modern long legs type Nick Cage. This is pretty subdued. Even when he's at his craziest, he's just running around the Australian wilderness eating quail eggs.
Yep.
And then he tries to kill Victor Von Doom, but then once he's all patched up and they give him his car back, he's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be banging children. And Victor Von Doom's like, no, well, maybe I should. Maybe you shouldn't kill that hobo's dog,
And then the actual crazed hobo returns for vengeance.
It's fun. It's weird. It might drag a tiny bit. It's interesting. It's a very unique and odd little movie. I think it pulls itself together real nicely in the last act. I thought it had a great finale, but it's a very strange one. Connor, what'd you think of The Surfer?
I thought The Surfer was good. You covered most of my thoughts. It's a very unique narrative. There isn't another movie that has this style of narrative. It actually reminds me a lot of the last movie we reviewed, but we saw it after Warfare. It's a movie that's just in one setting, and it's meant to just be like uncomfortable for the audience.
Yeah.
And it's long. It's like 90 minutes, but it feels like you're just getting tortured and like in an experience kind of way. It kind of feels like having a bad acid trip or something where you're like, what the fuck is going on? It's it's trippy, but I don't even mean that in like try hard way. It's just like weird. It's like, how crazy is Nicolas Cage? How true is this cult thing? Is he like just an insane person? But then you do have kind of hints that kind of shatter that illusion a bit, which I thought was a little unfortunate, since I would have preferred the movie just kind of boiled down and the audience was able to have more distrust. But things like Nicolas Cage being like, they made the monks sit at the monastery for 7 days, torturing them before they were allowed in and stuff. It's like, okay, I kind of see where it's going. So other than the movie kind of blowing its load a little early, I think, and like maybe trying to spell out some of the themes a little prematurely, I thought it was really solid and just kind of a really weird Ozploitation movie. It definitely feels like something that you could almost see having been made in like 70s and 80s Ozploitation boom during like when like Mad Max was coming out and all that. And like Mad Max was like Australian fucking, I don't know, Star Wars or something. That was like a blockbuster hit, but you did have a lot of like strange exploitation movies coming out around that time, and this feels like it could play into that camp well. So I guess I guess I haven't been really doing sort of soft Aiden, would you recommend The Surfer?
Yeah, it's weird enough that if what we've said sounds interesting, you'd probably want to give it a shot, but it's also weird enough that I think a lot of people are going to, and definitely did. Like, I was looking at the Letterboxd reviews when we were getting out from all the local people, and a lot of them were like, this was like boring and weird, and I can't really blame them for feeling that way either. I think a lot of people are going to get bounced off of it like that. It's
not boring and weird in the way that some festival movies are. It's like overwhelming and exploitative and weird, and it's definitely something of this was like their Midnight Madness film. They played it at like 10 o'clock or something because midnight movies don't exist anymore. But it's that vibe. It's definitely designed to be more of a midnight movie than playing at the film festival.
Yeah, it's a strange one.
It's a strange movie.
Connor, would you recommend The Surfer?
I'm with Aiden here. It's not for everyone, but I thought it was pretty good. So next I watched The Spies Among Us, which was a documentary film about East and West Berlin, and how in East Berlin spying was pretty rampant at the time when they were under Soviet rule, and basically an extension of that. And then it talks about the Stasi, which was basically a extension of the Soviet KGB, and did similar tactics of pressuring people through propaganda and other means to basically like force people to tell on their neighbor. And the main subject is Dorothy. Come on, man. That's not. You're weird, dude. But it's about. It's basically about Soviet era superstitions. The main subject finds out that he goes to prison, and years later, now apparently if you were part of the East or a subject of the East Berlin regime, you can like uncover your file. And basically he found out that his brother had a bunch of spying on his records. There are some caveats with his brother, of course. He didn't do it long and this and that, and but there's a lot of people who are kind of interviewed that had either figured this stuff out a while ago or found it out more recently, and it's like, oh, my Aunt Betty was a fucking traitor for or not even traitor, but just like worked with the Stasi government to try to get me put in a prison camp. That sucks, I guess. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of interesting twists and turns, and it just kind of follows this interesting man who was like a dance teacher and then found out his brother was a former Stasi and decided he was going to become a historian on the matter. Ended up becoming one of the nation's like top professionals in it, from being like some guy who was just part of that time and then eventually owned a dance school for years, and then basically it became his obsession. And there's some interesting like kind of looks into his psychology as a guy who basically had a lot of stuff recontextualized from throughout his life. He's definitely become paranoid. He meets people who are far more paranoid than him. They meet with actual Stasi officers, a lot of whom, some of them are remorseful and are like, what the hell? Like one Stasi officer's like, my son now kind of fights a Stasi-like regime in Africa. Not exactly the same thing, but he's like, yeah, I think in hindsight I was being kind of an asshole teaching people how to like, because this guy was like the top psychologist or whatever, so he's like, yeah, I was just like teaching them how to like use mental manipulation to like get people put in prison camps. And it's like, I feel bad about that too in hindsight.
Yeah, that was a
little bit of an oopsie daisy. And then there's another guy who's really young during the regime, but was like one of the top ministers. But he was just kind of like with all the geezers who were running it. And he doesn't feel bad about it at all. And but they talk with him a lot, and then it's like he's like, yeah, I think it was good. I think everyone fucking deserved it, and blah blah blah. And then it'll turn around and he'll be like, here's a picture of my granddaughter. We went hiking last week. It was really fun. So you get kind of this duality of this guy who's like locked behind his duty of this like fascist regime, and then on the other hand is like proud grandpa guy who's like became like a tour guide in Egypt and stuff, and like otherwise lives a pretty subdued life. So there's a lot of like really interesting stories about this time period with a lot of people who lived it, and a history that's just kind of far enough behind that people are willing to explore it, and the few people that are left alive are surprisingly open to talking about it, as much as the German government would rather just not touch on that. So, very interesting movie, basically. There isn't really much to like say. It's really well done. I don't know how to review documentaries. You never review documentaries on here, but I'm going to try to review another documentary, because the next movie I saw was Middletown, which was a movie about a bunch of high schoolers who this high school teacher started a video club, and then they started like investigating toxic pollutions in the city's landfill, which was built over their aquifer. So basically all the city's water had like garbage and toxic waste in it. People were getting cancer and stuff, so the kids get really into it. And basically, since they're the only ones who were talking about it, they just kind of bullied the government into being like, well, you know, whatever. And there was like mob connections and stuff, but the mob kind of got out of that racket over time, so they didn't really get any issues. So it was just kind of politicians having to awkwardly be like, well, if we did take a bribes for it, it was like for the best of the government or whatever. And yeah, it's an interesting movie. It's really fun and youthful. Has this like 90s VHS video feel, which I think is awesome. Like upper consumer grade VHS, so it's clear, but it still kind of has that like fuzziness and blur that you can't even like emulate well digitally. And it's just a wonderful little movie. And my fun anecdote is that I was sitting there and I sat in the third from front row, and then there was this like old Chinese lady taking a bunch of pictures, and I was like, oh, you know, she's really excited to see this movie, that's great. And then it turns out like all the movies like cast that showed up was there, which was kind of weird because I accidentally kept like tripping them because they were trying to be nice to me, but I just awkwardly sat in the row next to them, and then like I watched this movie for 2 hours, and then there was kind of a surreal moment where there was just like the main subjects of the documentary sitting right next to me. I didn't notice, so I was kind of happy I didn't fall asleep and like snore or anything, because that would have been kind of embarrassing. Yeah. But I did accidentally trip the lady like twice, which was kind of awkward, but she insisted I just stay seating and I didn't need to like stand up. Then I felt too awkward not to, and then she kept tripping over me, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you, lady. So interesting nonetheless. Good movie. I'm sure that one will probably... Well, that lady who I kept tripping apparently works in the TV industry or something, and there's a bunch of other connections, and it seems like something that would play pretty well to, like, environmental audiences and stuff, so I'm sure that'll get, like, Amazon Prime distribution at the very least soon if you're interested in it. Otherwise, all of these movies are pretty hot off of, like, the Sundance and stuff and have other appearances set, so you can probably find them at wherever if you're really interested. Next, I took a break and I went to an Ang Lee discussion. It's the only thing I saw that Sunday because it was my girlfriend's birthday, so I wasn't allowed to do much, but I insisted upon seeing Ang Lee because I wanted to go to the Q&A and ask him the ultimate question, which was there just a guy who did those dog testicles, the CGI dog testicles in the Hulk from 2003? But unfortunately, people kept raising their hands and being like, what do you think about streaming versus theaters? Do you think theaters should get fucked? And then Ang Lee would be like, I like the theaters. And that was pretty much it. And it's like, damn it, you're wasting my time and I'm trying to get the... But I saw like 30 hands go up, but it's like, I'm not gonna ask two-time Oscar Best Director winner about his dog testicles in his weird Hulk movie. I ultimately decided against it. It was kind of weird because like the producer of a bunch of his Universal movies was there. She's like, I loved Ang Lee, and then there's this little Chinaman who did a double backflip, so I signed him for Crouching Tiger, and it was pretty weird. I did like that. I felt like the MC was trying to wrangle in Ang, but he kept talking about like whatever the fuck he wanted to. He spent more time on Hulk than Brokeback Mountain, and he didn't even talk about Life of Pi. So I thought that was kind of weird. Yeah, like his two Best Director winners, and then he talked about how he blew up Hulk's dad in the Hulk movie because he thought his dad was being a prick lately. But then his dad died immediately after, so he felt really bad, and then he just kind of did Brokeback Mountain because a bunch of people told him he should make another movie, so he's less sad. And he's like, I really hated making that movie, but I really had a good time making the Hulk. And I was like, no one had a good time watching the Hulk, but at least somebody got something out of it.
Man's a big fan of the Hulk.
Yeah, that's the vibe I got. It's like, that man... I think, like, because even, like, Crouching, I feel like the Hulk probably got about as much time, or if not more time devoted to it than Crouching Tiger, and definitively had more time than Brokeback, despite how they were trying to steer the conversation. It was interesting. It was kind of cool seeing Ang Lee. He's a director who's always been around, and I don't know. Not a lot of big-time Hollywood directors come to the local religious high school to have a meeting, so that was fun. Next I saw Ricky, which is a movie about a guy who at 15 was trying to rob a gas station, got an attempted murder charge, went to jail for 15 years, and it is his first few weeks out of jail, and all the kind of trials and tribulations of having to basically figure out how to be an adult and have an adult life ready while you have a probation officer breathing down your neck, and kind of the challenges of people, some people kind of trusting you and giving you the benefit of the doubt, some people just dismiss him outright. He doesn't really understand how people work super well anymore, so he has a lot of anxiety. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. You really feel for Ricky. I've been using the word visceral a lot in these reviews, but the movie has a really tight shot composition throughout, and at first I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? Move the camera back. But as time went on, it felt a little more hypnotic, and we saw a lot of like Ricky's personal reactions, so after a couple minutes, you gotta kind of bear with the movie and get used to this, because it's very non-traditional, very like close-up, handheld type of shot composition. But once you get used to that, it actually kind of plays in the movie's favor. The director actually afterwards came out and said he was inspired by like the Safdie brothers and stuff, and then I was like, yeah, I kind of did have some elements of like Uncut Gems and Good Time, where Ricky gets put in hard positions, and through like shot composition and reactions and stuff, you kind of see how he's working through it. It actually like structurally reminded me a lot of Uncut Gems and Good Time, which I didn't really fully realize until after the film when he said that, but then it kind of clicked, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of, I mean, it's not as much of a crime film as those per se. There's a lot of stuff that happens. The guy was formerly incarcerated, and he has to deal with a lot of problems. He's definitely kind of an interesting character, and sort of a not particularly normal, based partially on his circumstances, but in a similar way to those Safdie brother characters. So I'm interested to see. The director also said he wants to do a couple spin-offs to Ricky based on other characters. Like, you have one character who basically right out of prison has sex with Ricky, and then it turns out she's an insane person, and she smashes him in the face with a bottle and basically gets him in trouble. Which isn't good on probation, but then she runs off, and he's like, I kind of came up with story beats for where I would take her story and do like kind of a movie that picks up from there that would act as like a sequel spin-off thing, and I was like, that sounds kind of interesting, and I'll keep an eye out for this. I don't know where something like this would release. It sounds like it's pretty early on, and it did pretty well like here and at Sundance and whatnot, so it'll probably get some sort of distribution. I'm interested to see where the director goes from here, because it was kind of interesting.
That sounds pretty good.
So Aiden's back in on this one.
Oh, is it time?
It's time.
Oh no!
It's time for the stinker of the weekend. The stinker of the event.
Big stinker, man. Well, I guess it's your turn to introduce it.
Oh, I didn't know exactly what structure we're going with. We're flying by the seat of our pants here a bit. So everybody hates sexual predators, and we decided, well, not everybody apparently. I don't know why I opened with that. That was not an intentional. That might, okay. Well, anyways, to bring it back, today we watched the feature, the video essay with the cinematographer known as Predators. A movie about Chris Hansen's legacy with To Catch a Predator, and is bad. So Aiden,
Yeah.
what was your thought? What was the plot of what was Predators all about?
Predators is a documentary, kind of hit piece, where the director found some weird European guy in a tie-dye shirt with a soul patch, who's apparently
Possible fake
a humanist.
It was like an etheriologist, humanist guy.
And the director and the European guy watch clips of To Catch a Predator, and the European guy nods and goes, "It's really mean how he's making fun of those pedophiles." And then for some reason the movie diverts and follows Skeet Hansen, who's a YouTube predator hunter, and like obviously just like the biggest clown ever, who just like harasses pedophiles in hotel rooms and then calls the police on them.
Makes them awkwardly sit there.
And he doesn't have any kind of legitimate operation, and it's really awkward. And they want to draw some kind of comparison to what Chris Hansen did. And then Act 3 is the Chris Hansen interview, where the director tries multiple times to lay gotchas out on Chris Hansen. And he's like, the director's like, I was sexually abused and I don't think To Catch a Predator is very funny. Chris Hansen's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Lots of people in your position do.
Catharsis out of it.
And then Chris Hansen lays out his 3 types of pedophiles that they saw on TCAP, where it's like, there's the seasoned predators, and then there's the
internet exclusive.
And then there's like the socially awkward people who just go for whatever they can. And the director's like, don't you think some of those people should be treated a little more lightly? And Chris Hansen says no, and then awkwardly leaves. And then it ends. Yeah. Connor, what'd you think of Predators?
I didn't really know what I was expecting from Predators. Predators starts with a really disturbing 5-minute phone conversation between a decoy and one of the Predators to really rile you up. The guy's like, I want to just saying disgusting shit. And for the thesis of the movie, in hindsight, that was a weird choice to start the movie on, because anyway, so then the preceding 45 minutes is basically just TCAP footage, and occasionally you have the weird European man sitting 3 feet away from a 9-foot projector, nodding his head and saying, "Oh,
very sad."
And then
sad
probably
this man ruined his life.
The
very
beef
sad.
of the movie that I think was most interesting, and what I thought was kind of what the movie was about, was he interviewed 3 of the decoys, 2 of the decoys, 2 of the people who were 18, 19 but looked young, young females, and they were all just actors who were yeah, it seemed like an interesting gig because who wouldn't want to get pedophiles? The most interesting being the male who was the one picked up by so if you know TCAP, there's a Texas attorney who was higher up in the town, got caught trying to do this, and then instead of Chris Hansen decided to go off script, and they went to his house, and then he took his life. And the conclusion the guy made was, we did a lot of good, and it's kind of unfortunate the guy ended his life, and that's really traumatizing for me because I feel too closely involved to his death, but we mostly did fine. And I think that guy had the most nuanced point on the matter. Because from there you go into the clown show, which is, so there's a lot of internet inspired by Chris Hansen people, and then it eventually, that morphed into a trend of live streamers tracking down pedophiles basically as a prank, and then beating the shit out of them, and then I've seen ones where they're making people drink pee and stuff, and
Skeet was the only one stupid enough to agree to this.
Well, if you wanted to do something like that, you gotta get the pee, man. But the guy who I saw this one where a dude was forcing pedophiles to drink pee after beating the hell out of them, stuff that's definitely immoral and illegal despite the circumstances, and in no way is designed to actually bring these people to justice or get them help. But then you get Skeet Hansen, who's basically a clown show version of To Catch a Predator with a weird woman who also turned out to be a victim of sexual assault. And then the director kind of tries to like gaslight her into feeling more bad for the pedophiles, and she's like, yeah, it's kind of fucked up that they ruin their lives, but like, at the end of the day, I don't really care. And the problem is, so why I'm describing all of this, and even down to the Chris Hansen interview, is like, the filmmaker went in with a beginning, middle, end, and conclusion before he started rolling the camera.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of like video essays at the seat of their pants. There's definitely a criticism to be made against TCAM, and there's probably ways that you could even make that compelling and convincing. This movie felt very manipulative in how it was trying to get by the message, and at the end of the day,
the movie has to try really hard to make you forget that the people who are getting made fun of on To Catch a Predator are like 40-year-old pedophiles who are trying to fuck children.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of like missing aspects that are also annoying. It's like, well, this is public humiliation and people are going to jail and their lives are getting ruined over the simple fact of trying to pick up minors. And it's like, I don't have sympathy for that, but... And then it's like, what in the human condition makes people want to watch it? Well, the problem is, it's really hard for a police department to like crack down on these things unless you're like caught in the act. It's hard to do a trial, and a lot of the times it doesn't go anywhere. So yes, there's some catharsis, and also a lot of these predators know who Chris Hansen are, even in the TCAB days, and even more recently. So the movie tries to portray like, is To Catch a Predator, the thesis is To Catch a Predator did more harm than good. But the problem is and it's like, and To Catch a Predator is so one-sided. There's no nuance. But then there's no one-sided or nuance. There's no point where he brings up the statistic of like, what was the average To Catch a Predator, like, predator getting in terms of legal and social consequences? Would you be able to get a predator to get on TV 20 years later and maybe they've totally rehabilitated their lives or something? That might be compelling.
He didn't find one.
He couldn't find one for obvious reasons. And like, the problem is you're trying to convince us of a lot of stuff. If they had a statistic come on screen that's like TCAB was catching people and people were, because it was a kangaroo court and people were getting 30, 40 years, no option at rehabilitation, people were getting murdered in jail and people were getting attacked on the streets. You have to have like compelling... I mean, I wouldn't feel that bad, but for your own thesis to work, you have to have some compelling counter arguments other than that is the argument he really wants to portray. Even like the Texas attorney, you had multiple people say, you know what, it's sad that he took at that point, but ultimately the only reason he didn't take his life because of TCAB. He took his life because he got caught doing something he wasn't supposed to do, and then he knew it would have...
man trying to fuck a 14-year-old. Who gives a shit if he killed himself, man? I don't care.
Well, yes, but there's also the aspect of like, he did it not because he felt remorseful for what he did. He felt bad because he was caught.
Yeah.
And because it would ruin his livelihood and stuff. And I feel the movie didn't do a good job. It doesn't. My opinions I'm not trying to review this based on my opinions on what I think. Because for me, I don't give a fuck. I'm like, you know what? I'm of the notion that if you're a child predator, sorry, dude. But like, we don't have statistics to like make this argument. Even if the end of the day the argument is like, make up your mind for yourself. Well, we weren't given compelling arguments other than this is the notion I wanted to come to really bad. And then he kind of failed at it, and the documentary went nowhere. As for the audience, I saw more people kind of compelled by the TCAP footage than the actual thing. And then one of the most interesting moments in the film is when he shows this crime convention, which was just like people are wearing t-shirts of serial killers and like buying merchandise and whatnot. And it's like, this is like a weird underbelly of like things. And even Skeet Hansen could kind of fit into that. Is like, these weird, obsessed with crime people who don't actually fucking care about the victims or anything and are using it, you know, for whatever. Because then you're like, okay, I kind of feel bad for the murder victim. A person was murdered and now you're profiting off their death and blah, blah, blah. Yep. That's compelling. Do I care that Chris Hansen caught a bunch of pedophiles and bullied them on TV? Like,
not even slightly.
No, it's like Jerry Springer, he did the same shit, but at least those people were like just fucked up and weird, you know? Like, people love that. I mean, America has a tendency to like this type of stuff, but I don't think TCAP is technically an offender of these things that you're saying, but it is a very small, you know, fallout. If anything, I think one of the least harmful fallouts when you compare it to like Jerry Springer. I mean, even the Maury show and shit was on TV, and that's just about finding poor people who don't know who the father of their baby is to beat the shit out of each other. Like,
yeah,
you know, technically no one committed a crime, but it's just like,
everyone
look at the
loves
freak show. But
in
this freak
case,
show is like
pedophiles getting arrested.
They also tried
to have sympathy in this.
The final thing they tried to do is they tried to get him with, like, there's this kid Hunter who's 18 and trying to hook up with a 14-year-old, and he got caught. And then ultimately the state dropped the charges, assuming that he was willing to do certain things. And Chris Hansen deleted the episode, and the guy's like, but it's still on the internet. And the guy's like, I guess he shouldn't have done it then. Like, I don't know.
It's literally that.
How are you going to delete it from the internet, Chris Hansen? He's like, well, I did my part, and now he should.
I like how the director started like bringing up, like, he pulled out his laminated Romeo and Juliet card, like in fucking Transformers 4, and he's like, in some scenarios this would be legal.
Yeah, like, he's like, not here, but in the state of Ohio, technically an 18-year-old can try to do this, and it's like.
Yeah, but also, like, those Romeo and Juliet laws are made for, like, you know, a fucking senior at his high school dates a girl 1 year older than him and then turns 18. They're not made for 18-year-old going around trying to pick up 14-year-olds on the internet.
And then having the laminated card. Yeah.
Pulling out the laminated fucking child sex card.
And then even so, there's still this argument that I think this movie fails to really capture, but also tries to capture, which is legal versus ethical. And it seems sometimes the legal semantics are only important when it aligns with the director's ethics. And in trying to prove that TCAP is a one-sided show that it's just horrible and doesn't actually look at all the facts to form an opinion, they made a horrible documentary about that's one-sided and doesn't show all the facts and opinion. And honestly, I just didn't find it that entertaining other than being able to see the TCAP footage on the big screen.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because I think there's something moderately compelling that you could maybe try to do if you found a tasteful route to it, and I think there were a lot of opportunities for the director to pivot here. You could have just focused on Skeet Hansen, because if you made an hour-and-a-half documentary about that clown show, there were great moments, like when the director bends down, there's this guy that Skeet captured, and he awkwardly bends down, and he's like, do you want to sign the release? Because without the release, me and him can't do it. And, like, the guy was, like, trying to get this guy to, like, leave because he felt bad for the predator, which, you know, morally. But it was a funny scene, if nothing else.
It was
you
funny.
know? And I don't know. I know what conclusion the director wanted me to draw. And especially the got me where he's like, "You're free to go, Chris Hansen."
Did draw that conclusion.
Well, yeah,
because they took this documentary entirely at face value and did not think about it at all.
Well, sometimes that'll happen. Documentaries are supposed to be one-sided emotional manipulation, and this movie really failed to emotionally manipulate me into feeling bad for the pedophiles or thinking that TCAP is unethical. Only made worse by the fact that you show far more unethical productions like Skeet Hansen. I don't even know what to say. Yeah. That's kind of where it all falls apart. Even so, it's like, you know, do I think Skeet Hansen telling the pedophiles they just got skeeted and throwing their videos on the internet is bad? It's like, well, you know, I don't know how much morally it's gonna do, but ethically, I I think I could probably sleep knowing that Skeet Hanson's out there. It's not bothering me that much. So, and it's not. I don't even think it's a matter of just my ethics don't align with this guy. It's also a matter of just the thing wasn't very convincing, and like I feel like the quack European guy with the fake soul patch. Like, what the fuck was your idea grabbing that guy? I don't know who this guy is. What are his fucking credentials? He just sat there nodding. He's like, I feel bad for the pedophiles in a way, but I also don't. And the director's like, so you think it's fucked up what Chris Hansen did? And he's like, I don't know why Americans watch this shit. And the guy's like, so you think it's like fucked up? And he's like, that's not for me to say. It's like, you're the fucking expert. You're here to say. You're here to trick the audience into thinking something. That's why you're here, fake soul patch. That's why you're here. Aiden, what did you think?
Yeah, it's bad. It's real bad. I mean, I don't know. The entire documentary really hinges on, like, trying to get you to forget what these people are doing. Like, they show egregious clips. The entire first third of the movie is just TCAP clips with some guy with a soul patch nodding along. And then the director turns and says, but didn't those poor guys deserve a chance? Like, no, I don't give a shit, man. I don't care. I don't care that the pedophile killed himself. I really do not care.
They also kind of skip other, like, TCAP moments that are big, like when the guy came with duct tape and a gun that they caught. Like, they caught legitimate, like, sex traffickers on the show. Like, one guy...
Or all the pedophiles on TCAP were like, man, I love your show. That shit's so funny. And then it dawns on them that they're on TCAP. Even the fucking pedophiles love TCAP.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. They're like, man, good thing I didn't get caught. Good thing I'm not like those guys.
Yeah.
Which I guess maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's not even really a movie about, like, our sick fascination with watching people get punished. It's just this bizarre thesis about how it's wrong to make pedophiles feel bad.
They
for
do,
trying to fuck
but they
children.
try to throw other angles in there, and then they come to the same conclusion, which is, at the end of the day, no one feels bad for pedophiles. Well, BLM meant that a lot of shows like Cops and stuff were canceled because of like the George Floyd stuff. That's true, but that doesn't really have anything to do with the point.
No.
You have things like you have other arguments, like, you know,
literally any
there's
other
so many like
crime.
other little branching arguments that the guy tries to bring up, but then every time it's like, but then you weigh it against the fact that, like, do we have a sick fascination with watching people get like arrested and stuff at their most like volatile moment? It's like, well, it's not that volatile to bring fucking, you know, I don't feel bad for the guy who brought booze and a condom to a 13-year-old's house, you know?
No. This isn't some fucking guy stealing bread from a grocery store to feed his family. Or...
Right, like Cops would be a documentary series, because half of that's just like filming people who are like having like meth fits, and then they're like, okay, I'm arresting this guy right now, and they like tase the guy for the camera. That's one thing.
No, there's no like act of desperation or justification for what's going down on TCAP. These people are fucking awful and deserve what happens to them. It's hard to get past the fact that, like, I really do not care if Chris Hansen's making fun of pedophiles. I do not give a shit. I really don't care. They show behind the scenes footage of TCAP. They're like, these were never broadcast, and they're really damning. And it's like a pedophile crying, and he's like, now I'm gonna lose my job. I'm like,
my wife's gonna divorce me.
And fucked a kid. I don't know, man.
My wife's gonna divorce me because she's gonna find out that I tried to solicit sex from a minor. It's like,
good.
Good. I'm sure your wife isn't mad at Chris Hansen right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fucking unhinged.
It's so
the
stupid.
Skeet Hansen diversion really just makes Chris Hansen look better with his legitimate operation.
Yeah, especially, you can't go from interviewing Skeet Hansen. Like, of course you're going to crush Skeet Hansen. The guy's named after bodily fluid. Like, but then you got to try to pivot into talking to, like, a trained news personality.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a
And your
David and
big-
Goliath situation, but the problem
And
is
your
David
big
got his ass
gotchas.
squished by Goliath.
Your big gotcha against Chris Hansen is like maybe some pedophiles aren't as bad as others, and Chris Hansen just says, I disagree.
Well, they also
And then
hit
it
the
ends.
prosecutor with that, and they're like, "What are you doing to rehabilitate these people?" And he's like, "My job is being a prosecutor. Ultimately, like, my problem is not rehabilitation." And it's like, you know what? That's true. That would be like me going to McDonald's and asking what the CEO is doing upstairs, or
Yeah.
that'd be like me going to.
Yeah, there's a lot of fucking just bizarre angles. Like, for some reason, the director's like, I just wanted to know why the pedophiles did this. And, like, every time they catch a pedophile and to catch a predator, Chris Hansen's like, why are you doing this? What's this all about? And they always just go like, I don't know, it's just like a compulsion. And that wasn't good enough for him, so he got really butthurt about TCAP.
Yeah, I mean that's
And-
pretty much his ultimate.
And then he's like,
excuse, really.
and then he's like, well, why didn't you like bring in a therapist to talk to these people? It's like, who gives a fucking shit, dog? They came to a house with a gun and a condom to fucking kidnap a 13-year-old. Who gives a fucking shit, man? Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
That's not compelling or interesting. No one cares. If the fucking law was changed and all pedophiles were executed, I wouldn't give a shit, man. I don't care. I do not care.
Yeah.
It is literally that simple.
I do think too, one thing that the YouTube, because I've seen some YouTube videos 5 years ago that tried to do the same thing, but they didn't have a cinematographer, so they weren't getting invited to film festivals. But what they would do is they'd slander Chris Hansen too, which is something you can't do with a motion picture
Yeah, I mean-
when you talk to Chris Hansen.
Turkey Tom is just like,
I don't know. Yeah.
TCAP's funny, but Chris Hansen cheated
Chris
on his
Hansen
wife.
cheated on his wife and
I do
went
not
bankrupt.
care,
So
man.
what do you think about that? It's like
I literally do not.
totally irrelevant. Chris Hansen could be a ginormous piece of shit, but if he's not a pedophile,
He's
then
catching
he's got
even bigger
to
pieces of shit,
step
man.
up on him. I don't know what to
it
say.
really-
Chris Hansen could be a fucking horrible con man who
It's
doesn't
so
give a shit about the
fucking
children
weird.
at all. But at the end of the day, like, I don't think like Skeet Hansen isn't doing it for the kids or anything. You're not doing it for the kids. What the fuck are you doing it for? I don't get it. I don't get it. Doesn't matter, But there just wasn't a convincing argument here. I think we've talked
No, it's
a very long
fucking
time.
stupid.
I would not recommend this one.
I also would not recommend Predators.
This is dumb.
We're gonna get age restricted for this one.
Yeah, I mean, we talked half this video. We should just put Predators and then put little corners about everything else. Finally, I watched Blue Road. It's a life retrospective on Edna O'Brien, who died shortly after the production, and she was a feminist author from Ireland. So it's a little bit different than Chris Hansen. There was. So she was basically like a controversial actor, and it's her sort of a memoir where you got a mix of like, my dad was kind of crazy and I have mixed feelings towards him because he tried to like shoot me once, but he was chill mostly. And she talks about how she fucked Sean Connery and he kept drinking milk when they were drinking. She was drinking wine and Marlon Brando downed a whole gallon of milk. And it was just various things about her life, like, and it was a very interesting story because she was just this country girl. She married an author, and she was kind of an author, so she was infatuated with this guy, and that's how they met in those circles. And then she eventually kind of outshined him with this like new wave. I mean, like, because Ireland at the time was very conservative, so you have this like. She's basically writing like high class literature, you know what I'm saying? Like for the girls. But also like with some deeper characters and stuff. I'm not sitting here shitting on it, but so it was an interesting documentary about this really interesting woman who went from basically a peasant to this person who was dating politicians and Marlon Brando and just became like this like world-class novelist and became like a public enemy and all this stuff. And I don't know, and you see a lot not only from her personal like writings and memoirs, but you also meet her as an older woman, and it's just a fascinating movie. The show itself had some people from like the Irish Heritage Center in Chicago and Minnesota show up, and it's a fascinating movie. I don't really have a ton to say. It's really well put together. It's really interesting. It's a well done hour and a half of a life story that I'm sure you could probably.
He's cutting my neck.
I mean, she could probably go. You could probably write. I mean, there's a whole book about her life, her memoir and whatnot. But I'm sure like there's a lot more to say. She had a very fascinating life, and a lot of really interesting stuff happened to her. And there's some like inspirational stuff and just like chasing the art and of this like longtime struggling artist from the mid 20th century who worked pretty much up to her death. Dropping her last novel a couple years ago and just dying last year in July. So it's a very fascinating movie, very sweet. Has a lot of really good archival footage. Does a good job filling it in with other footage and lots of interesting pictures. You can see some of her old like handwritten notes and stuff from back in the day, and it's very fascinating piece of like film just on this interesting part. I also just like feel like I don't know, like it's just like an interest. You see a lot of like interesting footage, like archival footage of like Dublin and stuff, and lots of stuff about Ireland and her time in America and in the UK. And yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to say. It's very like informative. There's a lot of like sweet and inspirational moments, and there's some moments that are like, this lady's totally unhinged, but she seemed pretty chill anyways. And yeah, no, it's just another kind of interesting artist who's brushing shoulders in a kind of a different genre than I think are the more famous modern examples, but she's brushing shoulders with like Marlon Brando and the Beatles and stuff, and making this revolutionary literature that was very popular in its own right. And it was a fascinating life story. I don't have a ton to say about it, just because kind of the nature of it. I thought it was well done, and yeah, that was the last movie I watched. So that was Minnesota International Film Festival 2025, number 44. I'll probably go next year. It was pretty fun. I had a good
probably
time.
Stop in a couple times next year.
I thought it was fun.
I think Maine. It's a nice theater.
I think my favorite movies were The Spies Among Us. Blue Road was pretty good. Middletown.
The Surfer.
The Surfer was
Weird
good.
old one.
Those are probably my top four. I think the other four... Oh, The Spies Among Us, too. I don't remember if I said that. Those are the five that I thought were really essential, but the other three were good, too.
Oh,
Two of the three were... One of the three bottom ones was good. I don't remember. I'm getting sleepy. But you get the point. It was pretty fun. I saw some good movies, and that's what counts. And like river or whatever, we flow on, and I don't know. Death and Obi are here, and we're gonna call it.